Boom shakalaka, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters around the world. It is your boy, Chris Shule, a.k.a. the Esoteric Noetic, a.k.a. the Chocolate Nubian Soul Brother from Ghana, West Africa, dropping the wisdomatic truth bombs here in Melbourne, Australia. Be sure to like the video, subscribe, click on the bell, tell your friends, tell your mom, drop some comments, let us know what it is. Let's get it. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to talk to you about a topic that is of such importance in the truth movement, but often gets overlooked. A lot of people that are part of this movement, the freedom movement, the truth movement, they like to focus on what is going on. Understandably, there is nothing more important than the present, the current issues that we are dealing with, the suppression of knowledge, the erosion of freedoms, these cover-up projects, the black ops, hidden agendas, where essentially we are seeing this world turn into a nightmare. We have to focus on these things. But not only do we need to understand the science of what is going on, but we also need to understand history. History and philosophy were often taught together because in order to understand wisdom, to understand the present and the future, we need to understand the past. Those that do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And when we are speaking about history, ladies and gentlemen, I often like to speak about ancient history. In fact, scratch that. Alternative history. History going back not hundreds, not thousands, but hundreds of thousands of years and beyond. A huge missing part of what is going on now deals with what has happened. That's why I like to talk about the hidden agenda behind our history. Now, you find anytime you move into these realms, you find that there are a lot of truthers that are very apprehensive about buying into anything that is not based off of hard materialistic science. You have a lot of left-brainers in the truth movement. A lot of people that refuse to believe anything that their mind cannot comprehend. Anything that deals like it's built up of air and imagination, understandably, because there's a lot of BS, both within the mainstream media and both within the hippie world where people believe in flat earth. People believe that every person is controlled opposition, any person that's trying to do good. And people often refuse to look at things critically, analytically. They live in this world of hippie science, weird science, and freaking magic to the extreme. But understandably, there are not only those that are too caught up within the right brain, too caught up in airy-fairy science. There are those that are so unwilling to look at things that they cannot comprehend within this Euclidean meat space that they fail to open their minds up to the truth of what is going on. Because the truth has more than one side. It's not just based off of logic, science, and reason, but is based off of the latent consciousness within all of man, all of the creatures of this planet. This ability to transcend things within this Euclidean meat space and see them for what they are within an intuitive, holistic worldview. And that's why I think it's important to look at any issue, not just critically, but intuitively. And when we're looking at the history of mankind, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that we have been visited by, wait for it, extraterrestrials. But the thing that I often find is a lot of people, when you suggest the evidence, it's not evidence to them because evidence in their mind has to be physical evidence. We're not talking about so much evidence here in terms of the evidence that you can see. I don't have a live reptilian, a live gray, or a live ancient artifact with me, per se, even though there is evidence, particularly if you believe in, and it's not really a matter of belief, particularly if you have educated yourself on many of the artifacts that have been hidden, many of the things that have been recovered through underground bases and so forth. People like Phil Snyder would speak about this kind of stuff. But anyway, I digress. Granted, there may not be clear, hard evidence per se, but there is a lot of circumstantial evidence, the kind of evidence where if this stuff was brought up in court, you would be able to make a very strong case that this is so. In fact, some of the evidence, particularly relating to the ancient writings, the cuneiform writings of ancient Sumeria, things that have been found in many of these sites, are so definitive that are so, if you cross-reference all this information, this information not only speaks about where these people got their knowledge from, but essentially the history of this planet. It's so definitive because you can have a look at many other civilizations that have referenced the same kind of story. The comparisons between these things are so strong that if this was put in court, it would be very clear that this thing holds. But the only reason that it has not been established as the main scientific narrative is because the people in power will it not to be so. In the same way that you could apply this to a lot of the things that are going on right now. The truth is out there, but it will not be accepted by the masses because there are certain people in power that do not want it to be so because it goes against the narrative. In regards to the origins of mankind, which I think is really important to understand if you understand what is going on, let's have a look at the origins of planet Earth. Now, planet Earth was not always known as planet Earth. And this is based off of the writings like the Enuma Elish, the Atrahasis, the Mahabharata. This is based off of many, many thousands of texts referencing the ancient origins of mankind, but specifically planet Earth. In the ancient records, planet Earth was referred to as Tiamut. Tiamut. And it wasn't the same planet. Now, in order to understand where this information comes from, you need to go to the Enuma Elish, which speaks about the origins of mankind and essentially a race of people known as the Anunnaki, which is essentially a term for those that are not of this planet. They are not terrestrials. They are extraterrestrials, those that essentially came down. Now, within the cuneiform writings, they speak about many of the phenomena that we see within the civilization of modern-day Iraq, ancient Sumeria, between the Tigris and Euphrates Valley. This civilization that simply emerged seemingly from nowhere, at least within the western part of the world. They speak about where they got their knowledge of the mathematics, the six decimal system, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, the common themes that we find within any civilization, such as agriculture, lore. All of this stuff was written down within their cuneiform writings, these clay stone tablets, so to speak. But they also spoke about the planets. They spoke about the fact that there were many planets within our solar system, 10 planets actually. They'd mapped out the many planets within the solar system. They actually diagrammatically represented this within the stone tablets. And they spoke of a planet called Planet X, Nibiru. Now, this is important to the origins of planet Earth, because according to their writings, this planet, which we have, but officially we have not identified. This planet has a 3,600 elliptical orbit. Essentially, every 3,600 years, Planet X, known as Nibiru, according to their writings, would approach between Mars and Jupiter and come in proximity to planet Earth. And this would create massive cataclysms. Now, if we go back far enough, many, many thousands of years ago, there was a point where this happened, and planet Earth essentially was confronted by this planet known as Planet X, and there was a collision. Essentially, this created cataclysms. Every time this planet comes in proximity, you would see massive cataclysms, and planet Earth essentially drew the moon, according to the writings, into its orbit, which was not actually within the orbit of planet Earth at the time. And in addition to this planet X, and there was a massive cataclysm, and Tiamat, which was a water planet, had a tremendous amount of water, fractured, and created severe problems within this planet. Now, essentially, over time, as you would see within the science of cosmology, the planet shaped into what we now know as planet Earth. And the interesting thing is, if you have a look at all of the ancient writings, they speak about these massive cataclysms. It is so clear that there was a point where there were massive cataclysms, destruction, great floods that were created. Now, whether or not this was synonymous with the creation of planet Earth has gone through many of these cataclysms. This is not the first time, that is for sure. But we definitely know within the writings, if we follow the writings of the New Elish, we correspond this to many other writings, that there was this massive cataclysm that took place and actually formed the planet that we know of now. Now, there are many theories in regards to how other cataclysms were brought about on planet Earth. Because as I mentioned, this was not the first time that this had taken place. Granted, this took place due to astronomical phenomenon, such as a different planet coming into orbit with planet Earth. This also would take place during massive battles that would take place. In the ancient records, like the Mahabharata, they speak about these wars that would take place between the gods, the Anunnaki, those that have come down essentially from the stars. How there were certain weapons that were used that would destroy the planet, like the Pashupata, the Brahmastra. The Pashupata being the most destructive weapon. This is the kind of weapon that would not just destroy countries, would not just destroy planets, but would destroy entire solar systems. It was spoken about in the Mahabharata as the kind of weapon that would bring about the quivering of the animals, of the trees. Poetically, they would say the trees would quiver when they heard this name because it had such legendary destructive powers. But unequivocally, there were massive cataclysms that took place, partly due to the War of the Gods, and partly, at some point, definitely, due to massive cataclysms dealing with planetary bodies coming in proximity to planet Earth. And it's interesting to note that the last massive cataclysm that took place before the re-emergence of the new Atlantis, because bearing in mind, Atlantis, which was an incredibly advanced society, which we still have ancient records of, had this knowledge, spoke about the wars that would take place, and essentially we have records showing that there was a great flood, there was some kind of massive cataclysms. Thoth spoke about this, how essentially he was given the responsibility as being part of one of the gods, the Anunnaki, as needing to come down to reseed the planet after this massive cataclysm. And we see after this cataclysm the emergence of the Sumerian Empire. And I'm telling you all of this because it's important to note that there have been wars that have taken place, that society, humanity, terrestrials, extraterrestrials have blown the planet up. The planet has survived many things. A lot of us were always speaking about how the planet cannot survive what we're doing to it, climate change and all of this kind of stuff. The planet will survive essentially anything we can throw at it. The question is whether or not we will survive. The question is whether or not we will bring about these calamities because of our actions, because of the weapons that we are using. Now, we have the destructive capability at this point in time to blow up the planet many times fold. And many of the things that we are doing, many of the tools that we are implementing, not just within the technological space, but also within the psychological space, the control mechanisms, the governmental approaches that we are using in order to circumvent the free will, may very much lead to these cataclysms that took place within the ancient world. And the question is whether or not we repeat this thing over and over and over again, or we bring about an efflorescence of consciousness. We finally emerge into the beings that we are destined to be, into this Aquarian age. One of the things that has been spoken about, particularly within the hermetical sciences, is the idea that there are these dark brothers, these figures that appear within every civilization, not just planet Earth, that destroy the planet through their control agenda, through their greed, their wars, which lead to these cataclysms. And if we are truly going to rise up as this society, as a type 1 civilization that is able to terraform the planet, bring about a utopia. I mean, we are essentially at a point where we have the resources, we have the technology in order to bring about a beautiful society where there is no famine, no greed. Free energy is a real thing. It's not something built of air and imagination. This is not some hippie idea. This is not some flat earth conspiracy theory. This is built off of solid reasoning. We have free energy technology. We have the ability to bring about a beautiful age in this world. And in order to do this, one, we need to understand what has happened in the past. And we need to make sure we do not repeat it. Because we have the understanding right now. The scientific understanding of how to create this society has been something that has been present for a long time. I mean, people like Tesla were bringing about these free energy devices. The only problem is that our spiritual development is not in line with our technological development. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, freaks and geeks, let us know what you think about this topic. I know a lot of people may be unfamiliar with this kind of information and they're very skeptical. Skepticism is a good thing. I think you should refrain from judgment until you are more conversant with the facts. But it is also important to be open enough to allow the truth to flow through you. If you are a shut door and you feel as if there is nothing you can learn because your paradigm, your worldview is that unless you can explain something within the materialistic worldview, you are going to be cutting yourself to a tremendous amount of information. It is about synthesis. It is about reasoning, understanding, but also about allowing your holistic understanding of things to reveal themselves to you. And this is what happens when you assess all the information, which I have done for a long time. This is not something that I've delved into. I'm not one of these people that has just recently touched on this topic. This is a topic that I've been studying with a tremendous amount of intensity for 3 decades. And there are people like Billy Carson that I really admire, people like David Icke, people like Michael Sarian, to name a few, that have been studying this for many decades, that have reached a brilliant understanding of this information. There are not many people that I really recommend that have a solid understanding of this stuff, both on the left brain and the right brain level, but there are a few of them. But it's important to realize that in order to truly understand what is going on in this world, we need to not just apply a logical, critical understanding of this stuff, but also a holistic understanding of this stuff, and realize that we need to learn from the history to make sure that we do not repeat it. Until next time, Surya Namaskara. This is your chocolate Nubian soul brother. Peace be upon your butt cheeks. Peace in the Middle East. Be sure to click the links below. Check us out on the Rumble. Check us out everywhere. Surya Namaskara. Ow!
What is liberty?
What the? Who says you can't build muscle on a vegan diet?
What's it like being a hottie in the vegan community?
There are no political solutions, only technological ones.
The economics of the system don't allow multiple competing systems to survive.
Engineering, technology, these arts of humanity, they are magic.